Again, we want to welcome everybody to Coles Hill, Massachusetts for this, the 55th National Day of Mourning. We want to thank everybody for coming out. We're going to have a few words about the rain in a minute. But before I do, I first want to acknowledge that we have our interpreters here. They're doing all that they can to make sure that this program is accessible. And so for all of our speakers, all of our people that are relying on interpreters, just ask that we speak in a slow, respectful, we're all going to get the words out. My name is Jean-Luc Farid. I'm from the Tunica-Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. My dad's side, my grandmother is Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. I am the president of the North American Indian Center of Boston, and also a proud member of United American Indians of New England. I'm going to read the recent Plymouth Public Schools land acknowledgement. We are doing that because so far the town of Plymouth has refused to adopt a similar land acknowledgement because too many town officials and residents are apparently concerned that a simple land acknowledgement could lead to reparations and loss of their real estate holdings.
That's right.
We acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded ancestral homeland of indigenous peoples, whose enduring presence we humbly recognize. We honor the Wampanoag people as the original stewards, and the Herring Pond Wampanoag as the surviving tribe indigenous to these lands. In our commitment to lifelong learning, we acknowledge historical injustices to the native people of this land and vow to educate ourselves, our community, and our students on the first peoples and the hardships they endured. We offer this as a small but essential step towards building a culture of truth and accountability. Now I'm going to call up our first speaker, Keisha James, from the Wampanoag tribe of Garrett-Aquina, the co-lead of United American Indians in New England.
Can you bring the stands up closer to us? The gospel?
Good afternoon, sisters, brothers, and siblings. Once again on so-called Thanksgiving, United American Indians of New England and our supporters are gathered on this hill to observe a national day of mourning for the indigenous people murdered by settler colonialism and imperialism worldwide. Today marks the 55th time we have gathered here to mourn our ancestors tear down settler mythologies, and speak truth to power. National Day of Mourning came into existence in 1970 when my grandfather, an Aquinnah-Wampanoag man named Wamsutta Frank James, was invited by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to speak at a banquet celebrating the 350th anniversary of the arrival of the Pilgrims. The organizers of the banquet no doubt imagined that Wamsutta would sing the praises of the American settler colonial project and thank the Pilgrims for bringing civilization to these shores. However, the speech that Wamsutta wrote, which was based on historical fact rather than the sham version of history perpetuated in the Thanksgiving myth, was a far cry from complimentary. In his speech, Wamsutta not only named atrocities committed by the Pilgrims, but also reflected upon the fate of the Wampanoag at the hands of the settler invaders. Wamsutta's speech contained a powerful message of Native American pride. "Our spirit refuses to die," wrote Wamsutta. "Yesterday we walked the woodland paths and sandy trails. Today we must walk the macadam highways and roads. We are uniting. We stand tall and proud, and before too many moons pass, we'll right the wrongs we have allowed to happen to us." When state officials saw an advance copy of Wamsutta's speech, they refused to allow him to deliver it, saying that the speech was too inflammatory. They told him he could speak only if he were willing to offer false praise of the Pilgrims. The organizers even offered to write a speech for him, one which would better fit with their settler narrative. But Wamsutta refused to have words put into his mouth. His suppressed speech was printed in newspapers across the country, and he and other local Native activists began to plan a protest. The flyer for this protest, which was circulated nationwide, read, "What do we have to be thankful for? The United American Indians of New England have declared Thanksgiving Day to be a national day of mourning for Native Americans." On so-called Thanksgiving Day, 1970, Wamsutta and members of at least 25 tribes, as well as a handful of non-Native allies, gathered here on this hill and observed the first National Day of Mourning. Attendees spoke about the Pilgrim invasion and conditions in Indian country, marched around Plymouth, boarded Mayflower II, and even buried Plymouth Rock in sand. One leader of the American Indian movement would later say of the first National Day of Mourning that it is, quote, "a day American Indians won't soon forget. We went to Plymouth for a purpose, to mourn since the landing of the Pilgrims, the repression of the American Indian, and to indict the hypocrisy of a system which glorifies that repression." So, why do so many Native people object to the Thanksgiving myth? According to this myth, the Pilgrims, seeking religious freedom, landed on Plymouth Rock. The Indians welcomed them with open arms and then conveniently faded into the background, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end. Here is the truth. First, the Pilgrims are glorified and mythologized because the circumstances of the first permanent English colony in North America, Jamestown, were too ugly to hold up as an effective national myth. Pilgrims and Indians are a much more marketable story than settler cannibalism. Second, the Pilgrims came here as part of a commercial venture. They didn't need religious freedom, they already had that back in the Netherlands. The Mayflower Compact was merely a group of white men who wanted to ensure they would get a return on their investment. Third, when the Pilgrims arrived, on outer Cape Cod by the way, not on the pebble down the hill, one of the first things they did was rob Wampanoag graves at Corn Hill and steal as much of their winter provisions of corn and beans as they were able to carry. Fourth, some Wampanoag ancestors did greet the Pilgrims and save them from starvation. And what did we, the indigenous people of this continent, get in return for this kindness? Genocide, the theft of our lands, the destruction of our traditional ways of life, slavery, starvation, and never-ending oppression. Fifth, the first official Thanksgiving did not take place in 1621 when the Pilgrims had a harvest time meal provided largely by the Wampanoag. Instead, the first Thanksgiving was declared in 1637 by Governor Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony to celebrate the massacre of over 700 Pequot men, women, and children on the banks of the Mystic River in Connecticut. subsequent slaughters of indigenous people would be celebrated by a day of Thanksgiving, and yet we are labeled as savages in the history books. So why does any of this matter? After all, 1620 was a long time ago, and the Pilgrim forefathers have been rotting in their graves for centuries. It is simple. The past influences the present. In her book, Lose Your Mother, A Journey Along the Atlantic Slave Route, Sadia V. Hartman wrote, quote, "I, too, live in the time of slavery, by which I mean I am living in the future created by it. So, too, are we living in the time of the Pilgrims." Because the settler project created by the Pilgrims did not end with the Pilgrims. The evils that the Pilgrims brought to these shores, racism, slavery, the class system, jails, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, these evils continue to affect the peoples of Turtle Island and beyond. For, as Plymouth loves to remind us, this is America's hometown. The United States was born here, and its myriad crimes therefore rest on the shoulders of the Pilgrim forefathers. And indeed, all settler projects worldwide, past and present, are indebted to the Pilgrims. These settler colonial projects have terrorized indigenous peoples for centuries. From the colonial period to the 21st century, this has entailed torture, massacres, family separations, systemic military occupations, and the forced removals of indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands. Let us not forget that this country was founded on the ideology of white supremacy, the widespread practice of African slavery, and a policy of genocide and land theft. Let us not forget that under the pipelines, skyscrapers, mines, and the oil rigs lie the interred bones, sacred objects, and villages of our native ancestors. Let us not forget that this is a country that continues to glorify murderers such as Christopher Columbus, that worships slave-owning presidents such as Washington and Jefferson, and even carves their faces into the sacred Black Hills of the Lakota. And until this country, this settler colonial project, and all settler colonial projects are dismantled, we will continue to live in the time of the Pilgrims. So the Pilgrims are not ancient history, and we cannot allow their crimes to be sanitized and forgotten. And that is why, year after year, we have gathered on this hill to tear down the Thanksgiving mythology. When people perpetuate the Thanksgiving mythology, they are not only erasing the Pilgrims' legacy of settler colonialism and genocide, but also celebrating it. But Native people did not simply fade into the background, as the Thanksgiving myth said. We have survived and flourished. We have persevered. The very fact that you are here is proof that we did not vanish. Our very presence frees this land from the lies of the history books and the myth makers. We will remember and honor all of our ancestors in the struggle who went before us. We will speak truth to power, as we had been doing since the first National Day of Mourning in 1970. The first National Day of Mourning in 1970 was a powerful demonstration of Native unity, and it has continued for all these years as a powerful demonstration of the unity of all people who speak truth to power. Many of the conditions that prevailed in Indian country in 1970 still prevail today. In 1970, our average life expectancy was just 44 years. Today, we continue to have the lowest life expectancy of any group in the U.S., and the death rate for Native women has increased 20% over the past 15 years. In 1970, our suicide and infant mortality rates were the highest in the country. This has not changed. All of us are struggling under the oppression of a capitalist system which forces people to make a bitter choice between heating and eating. And we will continue to gather on this hill until we are free from this oppressive system, until corporations and the U.S. military stop polluting the earth, until we dismantle the brutal apparatus of mass incarceration. We will not stop until the oppression of our LGBTQ and two-spirit siblings is a thing of the past, until unhoused people have homes, until there are no more murdered and missing Indigenous women and other relatives, until human beings are no longer deported or locked in cages at the U.S. border, despite the fact that no one is illegal on stolen land. Until no person goes hungry or is left to die because they have little or no access to quality health care, until insulin is free, until union busting is a thing of the past. We will not stop until the U.S. ends its colonial occupations of Puerto Rico and the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii. Until the U.S. stops its warmongering worldwide. Until the U.S. ends its interventions in Haiti and repays the billions it stole from the Haitian people. Until the U.S. pays reparations to Black Americans. Until land back for Native nations. Until free Palestine. Until then, the struggle will continue. In the spirit of Crazy Horse, in the spirit of Metacom, in the spirit of Geronimo, above all, to all people who fight and struggle for real justice, we are not vanishing, we are not conquered, we are as strong as ever.
Thank you. Okay, so just a few welcome remarks before we continue with the program. First of all, we wanted to do a roll call of all of our people that came on buses from Portland, Maine, from Western Mass, from Jamaica Plain, from the Bronx, from Brooklyn. Thank you, and welcome others who have traveled from a long distance, including the Red Nation, coming to us from New Mexico and Washington State. We want to thank everyone for being here on such a rainy day. And you know, we need, here in Massachusetts where we have a drought, we need and we welcome the rain. And for all of our indigenous peoples, when we say water is life, we welcome the rain, we welcome the waters. But it's a lot better for us to be out here in the rain for a few hours than what has taken place over the past few days in Gaza, where refugees living in tents have suffered the flooding that has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis. It's better for us to be here and to be able to go home. For all of our indigenous peoples, we say that we have a right to return back to our homelands. And we demand an end to occupation. Also, just want to give a quick word about our elders in our community. We are still living in a pandemic. COVID-19, many other diseases our community has faced over the last year. But our elders are still with us here today. Our community continues. And so of course we lift up all of our prayers. But we want to thank those elders, especially Matoin, who's with us here today. Despite it all, it's better for us to be standing here in rain. But so many of us have done so much just to be here today, and we want to thank you. So, just briefly, going to give the order of speakers. First, we're going to have Juan Gonzalez from the Council of Maya Elders. Secondly, and for the second time at National Day of Mourning, we will have a Palestinian speaker. We have Leah Kayali from the Palestinian Youth Movement. Then on our agenda, we have Chalia Naru giving the introduction for the Leonard Peltier statement, which has always been given to us. We're going to have Herbie Waters who is going to continue the tradition of his grandfather and read that statement from Leonard Peltier. We're going to have Tailing Mora, Taino from Boriken, Puerto Rico. And we're going to conclude this part of our action with the Red Nation and Demetrius Johnson. So with that, let's bring up Juan Gonzalez.
Reading the live stream? This is the live stream?
No, I appreciate it.
Maltios, to everyone here. As you noticed at the beginning, we were having a little bit of a hard time lighting a fire. And I want to thank you, each of you, for sending your good energy and help us light the fire. And at one moment, the presence of the Palestine people kind of created a fence around us, and that's when the fire started. So this means that each of us is needed to light the fire, and the fire is everywhere. You know that. So thank you for all of that. We must keep struggling, fighting, working, because our creation is facing really serious dangers today. And I'm not just talking about the United States. I'm talking about the whole planet, the whole Mother Earth. So if there is something that we take in our heart and in our minds today, is that to keep working together, fighting together, struggling together, but doesn't necessarily mean destruction, you know. We have too many examples of destruction all over. You know, the revolution in Cuba, the fall of apartheid, the revolution in Nicaragua, and look today now. Look, really open your eyes. It's just too many orphans, too many widows, too much blood. Why? Because the guys that have the power, doesn't matter if you call it left or right, you know, at the end of the day, they do the same, you know, oppress the people, oppress the people. So please open your eyes, and it's time to start destroying and changing those dreams of, you know, the revolution. The revolution is the solution. It's not. I know firsthand, you know, losing relatives, friends, family, it is a pain that never goes away. So let's take that with us today in our hearts and our minds. Let's keep working together, and there are many, many, many ways to do it. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the blessings of the sacred water that we need very much, because you know what? The water is the blood in our bodies, and we need that blood. So to end this moment, and I want to thank the New England American Indians of New England for sharing this space. Masosoy vive, la lucha sigue. Masosoy vive, la lucha sigue. Red Cloud vive, la lucha sigue. Jerónimo vive, la lucha sigue. Crazy Horse vive, la lucha sigue. Sitting Bull vive, la lucha sigue. Cuauhtémoc vive, la lucha sigue. Zapata vive, la lucha sigue. Zapata vive, la lucha sigue. The Palestinians vive, la lucha sigue. Malteo Shahao.
Needs to go home, huh? Okay.
I don't think we did.
Okay. If you could just.
Do you mind holding the mic for 2 seconds? There you go. Good.
No, you wanted it right.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. So again, this, well, first, we also want to just remind folks, we do have ASL interpreters, so we want to make sure we watch the way that we speak, so that we can be as accessible as possible. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. Reflecting on the raindrops hitting the tarp, it reminds me. I'm also an MLK visiting scholar at MIT's Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and this rainfall on the tarp reminds me of the encampments that we had across our campuses. The fight for liberation continues. Yet our students are facing the criminalization of just exercising their First Amendment rights. So shame on all of those institutions. But what the students have created is so beautiful. And I want to say that as North American Indian Center of Boston, United American Indians of New England, we are part of the Boston Coalition for Palestine. With our dear relatives, inclusive of our dear relatives at the Palestinian House and the Palestinian Youth Movement. So with that, I'm going to bring up our next speaker, Leah Kayali.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! The rain is really welcoming us today, isn't it? My name is Leah Kayali and I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement. And I'm so honored to be here today on the day of mourning. Because as a Palestinian, every day for the last 419